You know, when we talk about India's fight for independence, it's easy to picture this one big unified movement. But the real story? Oh, it's so much more complex and honestly, way more fascinating. It wasn't just one single story. It was more like a clash of giants, a battleground of powerful, competing ideas about what freedom even meant, and crucially, the right way to get it. So let's get into it. This right here, this is one of the most electric calls to action in all of Indian history, from the one and only Subhas Chandra Bose. It is absolutely radical, totally confrontational, and completely uncompromising. It's a promise of freedom, not through quiet talks, but through ultimate sacrifice and, yes, armed struggle. But here's the thing. For a lot of Bose's own colleagues, the answer to that question was a hard no. And this single question, this created a massive ideological split right down the middle of the Indian National Congress, breaking the freedom fighters into two totally distinct camps, each with its own roadmap for India's future. So on one side, you had the moderates. They believed in a slow, steady path of reform from inside the British system. And on the other side, the extremists. They demanded Purna Swaraj, and that means complete, total, absolute independence, and they were ready to use much more forceful tactics to make it happen. This table really lays it all out, and you can see just how different they were. I mean, look at their objectives. The moderates just wanted more Indians to have a seat at the table in a British-run government. The extremists, they wanted to flip the whole table over and kick the British out completely. Their methods were worlds apart. Moderates used petitions, basically working within the system, because they had some faith in British justice. The extremists, no. They pushed for boycotts and resistance because they saw British rule as fundamentally crooked. And their basic view of Britain, moderates thought, hey, maybe there are some benefits here, while the extremists were clear. This is pure exploitation. All right, so to really get this whole divide, you've got to start with the group that was there first, the moderates. Their whole game plan was built on patience, on dialogue, and this deep, almost unshakable belief in the British sense of fair play. And for a solid 20 years, from the very beginning of the Indian National Congress, this careful, constitutional way of doing things was the only way. The leaders at the time really believed that Britain's own ideals of liberty and justice could be used against them. The idea was, if we can just prove we're capable subjects, they'll have to give us more rights, and we can slowly, piece by piece, reform the empire from the inside out. You can actually boil their whole strategy down to something called the 3 Ps. First, prayer. And that just means appealing to the good conscience of the British. Second, petition, writing up formal complaints and asking for reforms. And third, persuasion, using debate and solid arguments to convince the British government to give India more control. It was all about playing by the rules. And the guys behind this strategy, well, they were some of the sharpest minds of the time. You had Dadabhai Naoroji, known as the Grand Old Man of India, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, who would actually go on to be a mentor to Gandhi, and Surendranath Banerjee. These were highly educated men who truly believed that Britain's own democratic ideals could be the key to unlocking India's freedom. That, after 2 decades of petitions and prayers, with very, very little to show for it, a new, much more radical group started to gain traction. They were getting impatient, they were fed up, and they were ready for a totally different kind of fight. Let's see what lit the fuse. The real tipping point for a lot of people was the partition of Bengal in 1905. To them, this was the ultimate proof that Britain wasn't interested in being fair. They were just playing a game of divide and rule. And that act lit a fire under a new wave of nationalism. It gave rise to leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Lala Lajpat Rai, who basically said that the 3 Ps of the moderates was just a fancy term for political begging. And their central demand, their rallying cry, was captured in this one powerful phrase, Purna Swaraj. This wasn't about getting a few more seats in a council run by the British. This was about cutting all ties, taking full control of India's destiny, and achieving 100% sovereign independence. This was a complete game changer in the national conversation. And while guys like Tilak lit the spark, maybe no one embodied the raging fire of this extremist ideology better than Subhas Chandra Bose. I mean, his life story is practically a textbook on radical action and a diehard commitment to Purna Swaraj. Okay, let's just trace his path for a minute. In 1919, the horror of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre convinced him that British rule was just fundamentally violent. A year later, he does something incredible. He resigns from the super prestigious Indian civil service, basically saying, I can't serve the very government that's crushing my people. Fast forward to 1941, and he's escaping house arrest, trekking across continents, all to form his own army, the Indian National Army, to take on the British directly.
And this, of course, put his philosophy on a direct collision course with Mahatma Gandhi's. Now, Bose deeply respected Gandhi as a leader, but he completely rejected the idea of ahimsa, or nonviolence, as a practical way to win freedom. For Bose, you had to win independence by any means necessary.
Now, it's so easy to just paint these two as bitter rivals, right? But their relationship was so much more complex than that. It was really this classic case of a massive disagreement on methods, but it was all rooted in a shared, deep, unwavering love for their country. There's a perfect way to describe this in Hindi. They had muthbed, which means a difference of opinion, a clash of ideas and strategies. But, and this is the important part, they had no manbed, which means no difference of heart. Both men wanted the exact same thing, a free India. They just had completely different blueprints for how to build it. And that mutual respect ran deep. I mean, here's a perfect example. Despite all their public arguments, it was Subhas Chandra Bose himself, in a radio broadcast from Singapore in 1944, who first gave Mahatma Gandhi the title Father of the Nation. Think about that. What a powerful tribute from one patriot to another. And it gets even better. In a move that seems almost unbelievable, Bose named one of the 4 brigades of his Indian National Army, an army built to fight, the Gandhi Brigade. So even as he was preparing for war, he was honoring the man who stood for absolute nonviolence. So what do we make of all this? What does it mean for India's story? Well, it means the road to freedom was anything but a straight line. It was a messy, winding path, shaped by fierce arguments, clashing strategies, and this constant push and pull between these two powerful ways of thinking. When you look back, it's clear that both the moderates and the extremists played a vital role. The moderates, they built the political foundation and brilliantly exposed the economic damage of British rule. And then the extremists came along and fired up the masses, they filled them with national pride, and they made the demand for total freedom a force that could no longer be ignored. And that leaves us with one final big question. Was it the patient constitutional chess game of the moderates that slowly wore down the empire? Or was it the radical all-or-nothing demand for Purna Swaraj from the extremists that finally forced the issue? Maybe, just maybe, the truth is that India needed both. It needed the prayer and it needed the sword to finally forge its own destiny.